Thank you for tuning in to Koppen with Comic. I'm Brian Koppen. We're with comic Meredith Dietz. Meredith Dietz, how the hell are you?
Well, I'm doing just fine, Brian. How are you?
Oh, good. Well, I'm so glad you're here because you're the one who's keeping us laughing during the quarantine because you write for people like The Onion and Reductress.
I mean, you didn't call me a hero, so I'll just say it. Yes, exactly.
And so,
Writing
yeah,
as
what,
much as
what,
I
yeah,
can during this time.
what does that entail? Because here on your Twitter thing where I follow you, your Dietz_Meredith, it says you're a headline contributor. Kind of how does that differ from somebody who's also writing the articles? Because I mean, the headlines are the funniest part.
I would say, yep, the joke is definitely always in the headline.
Yeah.
So after the real writers in their writers' room, like, are all based in Chicago and like work all under the Onion entity. Like, if you notice on the Onion, there's never any bylines. It's always by the whole. It's very highly collaborative, so everything's Onion. But they have, like, throughout the country around, I think it's like 50 to 70 contributors. So once a week we submit 10 headlines, and it's just the headline joke, none of the article, and then those get voted on and sometimes accepted and published. And we never really know who writes them. It seems like everyone just pitches joke and it takes one person at the end to polish off the whole article. But yep, it's just contributing the joke itself.
Yeah. So at what point in the process is that? Because I imagine some of these things can, the article, the content can arise out of a funny headline, or are you actually reading is everybody reading the article and a bunch of people are pitching, how to make this headline as funny as possible?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. As far as I know, their writing process is always headline first, and then because like you said, that's the funny part. That's what gets.
So their ideas and their writing are actually, the germs of their ideas are in all these headline contributors' ideas.
Oh, mix. They definitely could, especially with timely things. It all comes from the writers' room themselves. But for evergreen headlines, like if I see a baby on the subway and I'm inspired by some insightful observation, I might submit that in my Monday 10 pitches, and they might publish that anytime in the next few months. But if you see something extra spicy about Trump or Saudi Arabia, or one of those two, that usually comes from, that's me reading the news. That usually came directly from their writing staff.
Now is your, when your headline gets published, is it always accompanied by an article? Because I had Brandon Follick on, and I thought that some of these might have been just Reductress, might only be headlines. Is that, does either the Onion or Reductress traffic in just headlines sometimes?
Well,
always accompanied by a blurb, yeah.
I'm so happy you talked to Brandon, because he, in addition to being one of like the funniest joke writers for Reductress, one of his images is consistently used as like the straight white douche. All the Reductress things, and he couldn't be more different from that. But I love.
I saw his picture and going in. I was picturing I'd be talking to some straight white douche, and that's not what I got at all. I just got a fucking just hilarious fucking dude who was the farthest thing from straight white douche.
I know, so disappointing. But to answer your question, could you repeat your question?
Well, the question is, sometimes, like on Reductress, is it always accompanied by a blurb or a longer article, or is there a section of the website where it's just headlines? Because a headline can just appear. You're reading an article on Reductress, and along the right side, there's of course headlines of other things you could read. Is it ever just a headline, or is it always going to have at least a funny blurb with it?
Oh, I understand. So on Reductress, they do have, from the print edition, which is just a section of the site which are all one-liners, where you click on it and either the image aids the joke, or the joke is just standalone and they don't read the article.
Yeah.
But
that's just on Onion, that's just on Reductress though, right?
Yeah, and Onion actually has a lot of different facets to it. So the news in brief, that's what it's called, is the most common one, where it's a like breaking news headline of some sort, and there's always a like 250-word article underneath. But they also have one-liners like on their Instagram, which means there's no image associated with it or article. It's just the joke itself. It's just a headline.
Wow.
And they also have just image ones, but the Onion also has like their feature section, like top 5 tips for apartment hunting, and they're all like, like stalk the realtor, get to know them, find out like that's like their tips. So the Onion actually, has a lot of different forms, but the most common and what I contribute are supposed to be evergreen headlines. So something that can be used any time of year, isn't timely, and ideally should have a like 250-word article that can accompany it, which is important to keep in mind when submitting.
Yeah.
So there are tons I submit where I'm like, this is it, this is the joke. If there's nothing else, then I'm so happy with this being a standalone. But it's helpful to try to think, okay, well, what's the follow-up? Where can the real writers take this after I submit it?
Yeah.
And because you don't want to waste people's time with just a bunch of just one-liners all the time.
So in those situations, number one, if something doesn't get accepted, can you use it for yourself? And number two, have you ever had just kind of a one joke headline that is so funny that it ended up just as their one-liner on Instagram?
When it comes to like rejected headlines, they're totally still your own. It's not like a NDA situation where once it reaches Onion eyes, then you can't use that anymore. They just obviously request that you don't advertise it as like, oh, this wasn't funny enough for the Onion, so now I'm taking it to.
It's like non-disparagement instead of ownership or something. Because
exactly.
I mean, I would think if they have 70 writers, the minute they're like, once it sees our eyes, you can't use it, homie. Those 70 writers would be less likely to submit there.
Exactly. And so in that same vein, though, because it's so highly collaborative and like it's the Onion brand is never attached to like any individual writer, we're really not supposed to like assign ourselves a byline. Like if I see that something I wrote got published, I'm not supposed to be like posting all over social media like I did this, because there was a real team effort to get it to be published. But I have seen my own headlines and obviously been compensated for one-liners on Instagram. There was one recently about laundry, and I remember. Sorry, it's changing now. I remember I had one about like the NRA at one point, and I was so happy there was no byline attached to it. Reading those comments, I was like, oh, if my name was on that, I would have been hunted down by now. People.
Yeah. Like I did this Stephen Scalise joke after he got shot.
Oh, wow.
And it was immediately, and I said something like, at least guns don't kill people, because that's their argument on the right. It's like, guns don't kill people, people kill people. And so like immediately after he was shot, I said that, because I went to law school, and that's one of the arguments that they have. And immediately, my small Twitter account, back in the day when I used to write jokes, it got boosted by some right-wing commentator in fucking Omaha, Nebraska or some shit. And all of a sudden, like, they can retweet it to all their followers, and all of a sudden you have people who are not your they don't really agree with your sense of humor at that point. So it's good they kept your byline off. But I suppose at that point you absolutely repost it or whatever they do on Instagram. You just don't say this is mine. You just kind of repost it, and of course all your followers know that it's probably yours.
Oh, 100%. You see right. But I'm glad. I mean, with your Twitter situation, I mean, obviously, I assume you just had some very amicable debate, and everyone admitted that there are different sides to every issue. But did you come at it as like from more the lawyer background, or were you like, I'm making a joke?
Oh no, like I think I'd billed myself as a comedian back in the day, and I did that, and of course I deleted it immediately because I was like, I do not need this. Like it's not helping me in any way. Like I don't give a shit. It was an easy joke. I imagine there's a parallel thought of 20 other people who thought of the same fucking thing. But then he like posted a screenshot and he's like, the internet lives forever, Brian. And I'm like, who the fuck cares? Like, I don't give a shit. Like, do I really think I'm going to encounter any of your Nebraska people in New York City because you've screenshotted my old joke? Who gives a fuck?
Exactly. Oh, wow.
But like, are a lot of these, funny tweets, like if it was rejected headline, it can just be a hilarious tweets. It can be a hilarious tweet at Dietz_Meredith, right? As long as you don't disparage the Onion for having rejected it. Exactly.
And I love the plug, but I would not advertise my Twitter as hilarious. I would advertise it as half-baked and largely rejected.
No, I'm looking at your pin tweet here, Michael Sarah. That's, dude, the first tweet I see, the pin tweet is fucking hilarious. It took me 1 second to read it, and it's fucking original and perfect.
Okay, brag about your reading speeds.
But how'd you even get this far? Like, how? Like, obviously you're hilarious, but how does one end up working for the Onion? Like, I was in Chicago for a while, and I thought I saw their office. Are they in the River North neighborhood? Do you know?
So I've never been to Chicago,
Right.
devastating, but yes, they are based in Chicago. That's a great question because a lot of people do ask that, and I consider myself very fortunate in just the kind of word of mouth way of finding out. Basically, twice a year they offer a fellowship position, like to one or two writers, and the packet for that comes out, and it's very like open application. It's 25 headlines, three of those written out in article format, and then one of those features jokes, like the sort of like top 5 tips for buying a car, top 5 myths about coronavirus, that kind of joke, which I love. And some people are like features contributors like that. Basically, spoiler, I did not get the fellowship, but the pipeline that I know of is if you get into the top 10 applicants for the fellowship, then they extend a 4-week trial period where you submit pitches, once a week for 4 weeks. And
Yeah.
I believe they judge like the range there, and timeliness. And, that was an opportunity. So for like the fellowship application, I didn't really do a lot of timely stuff as much because I didn't know when they'd be reading it versus when I was writing it, that sort of thing. You want to
Yeah.
do screen and show that you're able to like make those sort of onion-like observations and just show a range in general. Like, here's a pop culture piece. Here's their like, they have like an area man character sort of who always is making like very absurd. I love area man. I love.
Area man is fucking hilarious. And like, is the reason they also have you write article length ones because they know that if you ultimately are a contributor for the headlines, you have to keep in mind that, okay, an article is going to have to come from this? Or are they thinking if you're good enough at writing the articles, they're also going to offer you a job in Chicago? Or,
I
or,
think
or some of their article staffers are, but I think you said all the staffers are on site in Chicago.
that's my understanding.
Okay.
Also, I should have said this at the beginning. Everyone, take all of this with a grain of salt. I exist with the Onion mostly through email. So, but they've actually been doing some like sit-in meetings recently since it's all been virtual, and that's been fantastic to observe. Just people
Wow.
just like some of the funniest satirical minds, just like riffing about like how Saudi Arabia hurt our feelings when they started making their own explosives. It's great, but I think the goal of writing those is because they are trying to find someone to be their fellow, which is, I assume the natural way to then join the writer's room. It's like I think if someone, because that's such an intense learning experience, and what a great way to like figure out if someone is cut out for the writer's room. But I think it's also a bit of the first thing you said of like, okay, now is this someone who can just master the one-liner, or is this someone who's actually thinking about it in the context of a story with real legs? So a mix of
Yeah.
both.
Yeah, so the Zoom meeting or whatever you were able to virtually attend that had you kind of a fly on the wall in the writer's room, if that was not going on pre-pandemic, I would think it should continue regardless because it seems like it would be a great fringe benefit for anybody who's contributing headlines.
If they're listening, I agree.
Yeah, right. I mean,
I know.
and also you could, I suppose you even could clamp down certain things. Like if you wanted people to stop working for competitors, you can be like, well, if you want to kind of join the virtual writers' room in the future, you can do so. But if you're exposed to our great minds riffing satirically, it's like you can't be working for Reductress at the same time.
Oh, I think you definitely can. I mean, Reductress and Onion just have such distinct voices on their own. But
Yeah.
I think like one of the greatest benefits also is one, the like creativity and the flow in that, but also like I always want to know if what kind of topics just makes the whole room just like groan with
Ah,
like frustration or discomfort, like what could, and like another example is sort of an maybe unspoken, maybe overt rule of like Reductress, Onion, those kinds of satirical things is you're not really supposed to write headlines about comedy because that's
yeah.
so inside baseball, or it doesn't reach to mainstream, or it doesn't feel like it's like punching in the right direction. Like, cause when I like review like some people's like satirical headlines, just like in a workshop setting, there's always one of like um, improv 101 class show, not that bad, which is obviously funny to us, that just doesn't reach the mainstream audience. And which I would love it, where it's like I'm guilty as well. Like a joke I was attached to, I think for a while, was like, open mic comic has refreshing insight into masturbation, bitch girlfriend, something like that. I don't know. But that makes sense to me because I've been in a basement with a bunch of open mic comics who have so much original, fresh insight into their bitch girlfriends. But honestly, that's not even that true to my experience. I've done like Brooklyn comedy where it is mostly not straight guys being awful. I mean,
yeah, I hear they have good audiences there, and maybe it's because it actually allows the good comedians, the original comedians, to kind of spread their wings, and all the hacks with their masturbation, bitch girlfriend jokes can stay in Manhattan or something.
Can stay in Manhattan and can stay at like just the venues where I didn't go. Like there was just a bit like maybe I put myself in a bubble, but maybe I also made the right choice in always going to mics that were, primarily for marginalized people or for like LGBTQ spaces or just not straight spaces.
Yeah. I was so just taken with the fact that I had Schnook Tessera on, and I had Colby Smith on, and he agreed too that like a lot of the great mics are in Brooklyn. And I think Colby Smith said something like, dude, for a while there I was able to go to all my mics and not get off the G train or the L train or whatever that fucking train is. Like that's amazing. Yeah. But like I live in Astoria, Queens, and it's just like, we have QED, but I'm not really a stand-up. But just having the early experience of having, going to mics in Greenwich Village or some shit, and it's just like no audiences whatsoever. And like I had an audience in Chicago. The first audience I had in an open mic was actually a real audience, and that was amazing. So I just, unless I'm living in Brooklyn, I just can't fathom going through the open mic rigmarole, unless like you actually have real audiences there. And it sounds like that happens in Brooklyn.
Wait, so your first open mic ever had a real audience?
Oh yeah, it was in Chicago and had a real audience. Totally, the Cubby Bear right by Wrigley Field was totally full. It was full of drunk people. They loved me. It was great. And then I moved to New York City, and I went to a couple Greenwich Village mics, and there was 5 comics there, and they're all paying attention to their phone.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, tough crowd. Wait, but you're in Astoria. I'm in Sunnyside.
Oh, right? Cool. Yeah, I lived in Woodside for a second first. Yeah, so I know Sunnyside. It's on the way from Woodside to Astoria.
I'm actually kind of in more Woodside, but I say Sunnyside. That's honestly exposing what I always do because I'm from Pennsylvania, and I'll say I'm from Philly, and they're like, "Oh, I'm actually from just outside of Philly," and I'm like, "Okay, me too. I've been to Philly twice." But yeah, I'm in Woodside. But I would say they're an interesting mix of the two things you described. Is that Brooklyn? I mean, the audience is always other comics for the most part, at least where I was, but they're really like supportive, encouraging audiences. I think that's the difference. When I would go to like a Manhattan mic and I'm like, it's like what you described. I'm like, oh, everyone here is on their own phone, like mouthing along to their own set. And I would go to Brooklyn where people like genuinely will laugh out loud to like at first to give you encouragement, and not always in like the fake way, but sometimes in the way that they're just like being generous, giving hosts, like in the same way that you're laughing at this podcast right now.
You're like, well, yeah. So they're kind of saying, hey, if I'm laughing here, there's something there, and on the other side of the coin, I'll be silent for the moments I don't see anything promising there. It's like laughing is signaling that yes, Meredith Dietz should go in this direction. And I think there's kind of there would be a role for something like what you're doing. Being a fly on the wall, being a headline contributor. I love the idea of that. Is there any way to do that in the stand-up scene that would allow supportive people to kind of comment on each other's stuff, either online or at mics or whatever? Have you ever tried to kind of like, bring your great experience with collaborative stuff at the Onion or Reductress, bringing it to the stand-up comedy scene, or no?
I think not in a way that I can take credit for, but I know that a lot of really fantastic writers have merged those spaces in original and supportive ways. Like, I wish I could plug their stuff more thoroughly, but like I know there's something called like Some Fun Lines where people read things, or someone on Twitter is putting on a show right now, sort of like rejected headlines. I think it's called like This Is Not For Us or something, where people can go and like in a more stand-up style present all of their rejected work, which I think is so fun and reflective of like the supportive community and the fact that we all have faced rejection together, and it's not something to shy away from. It can be something that can be reworked as the bit. Like that you say, like, it's sort of like when you read something off your notes app and you're like, this is not really a joke, it's just a thought. And once you read it, it becomes maybe like the lack of humor or the fact that it's so half-baked makes it funny. In the same way that, like, you present something, you're like, check out this thing that got completely rejected. It makes it like, oh, I have one thing that I think I've submitted it so many places, and it's embarrassing to say. I just thought it was so funny like 2 years ago, and I couldn't ever give it up. It was something about the like dwindling bee populations, and I was like, nation scientists like combat dwindling bee populations with advent of single 10-ton bumblebee or something stupid as hell.
Yes,
And
I love it.
but you know, like when you just get attached to a joke and you're like,
Yes.
I've never gotten good feedback, but I'm gonna die with this baby.
Yeah. And so what do? You kind of videotape yourself kind of saying it out loud and then you put it on this rejected bits thing, or no?
I think the rejected bit thing is going to be live.
Okay.
And I don't know their next lineup, but I know that, and I also think that's been almost entirely women or like woman identifying, but maybe that's just like reflective of the people it's reached. Maybe that's not like a requirement or anything, but I think it's so great to be able to have a community where you can like be like, this joke didn't work for anyone real, so now you all have to
but I love that too, and I almost see, you know, if I ever start up, you know, open mics, like if the quarantine never ends and we have vaccines and shit like that, I would love to, you know, I think I've had about 150, 160 guests on here. I think that among them, there has to be people who would like to go from open mic to open mic together, so that, you know, that, I mean, first of all, you're incentivized to do new stuff because they're more likely to laugh at stuff they haven't heard. But if you had some sort of common rule where everybody has to pay attention and stuff like that, and in return everybody pays attention to you and doesn't leave because you guys are going to be going from mic to mic together, like there's got to be something there. There has to be, and it sounds like there is. And the things you named are things I can take advantage of. But man, there's got to be a way for me to kind of do this, you know, with former guests or whatever. Everybody's kind of at a different level though, so that will kind of you know, cut down. But even the most experienced people need fucking mics and shit that are quality, you know?
I completely agree. Oh man, if you just started this like a live podcast recording, but like more like a mic, I think everyone would be down. And you'd have to force everyone to go to Astoria, which is, you know, abroad for some people. But
yeah.
I would love to make people come to Queens. That's my dream.
Yeah, we'll do it together. Yeah.
Yeah,
Brian Koppen and Meredith Dietz are doing it in Sunnyside, Woodside, and Astoria, or we could do it online, I suppose. But yeah, it would have to have rules, you know, like everybody has to, you know, stick around and via Slack or whatever, give 3 comments on everybody's shit, you know? Like, and I think there's probably a way to do that. But, you know, I think the germ of the idea is here in Meredith Dietz's episode, and that's fucking great. And we're going to keep it. And one question I have real quick is, I know that Brandon Follick serves as the picture of certain reductress articles, and he comes across as a straight white douche or whatever on articles. Like, has your picture been used for any reductress articles? And what would the accompanying headline be if we saw your picture? I'm looking at your picture here on Dietz_Meredith at Twitter here.
Well, tragically, if you're looking at the picture, you know I have a face for writing. No, that's a face for podcast. I have not been a stock photo. I think they've had calls for like photo shoots before, and a lot of the photos are not people who are writers. They're just like friends of writers. And I think like someone had a viral tweet recently about like, I can't believe I accepted to do this stock modeling shoot 10 years ago. It's just then like being like, I killed my wife. That's obviously not an example, but you know, which would, I am cheating and pulling up productions right now to see one of my
yeah, I would think your Twitter bio would have a different headline than your Instagram bio. Your Instagram, of course, is Dietz_Dietz.m. And something on Dietz.m would be something like a really happy like college student or professor. And then on your Twitter one, Dietz_Meredith, it would be something like, because you're with somebody else there, and you guys look like you're ready for some sort of music festival that's also has kind of a liberal politic to it.
Oh, I know exactly what the picture is. It's from music festival from Jamaica Plain in Boston. They have
Is it a music festival?
Yeah. jazz fest. It's one
Yes.
afternoon, or maybe
Yes.
it's also, it brings that Jamaica Plain Boston community together. There's like always this one ancient guy in a cowboy hat who's letting loose. There's weird electronic indie stuff from like the Berkeley Music Kids. There's like a jazz band that has all ages and ethnicities. Oh, what a fantastic environment. And it's in the park, and I just kick my shoes off and I
Yes.
dance with all the people who have families and dogs.
So I kind of nailed that, right?
You really did. And
So you're telling me the truth. That wasn't everything you're telling me about the jazz festival is true.
no, I just riffed that. No, yes,
No,
it's
really?
all
Did you riff it?
no, it's completely true.
I believe
It's,
either. You're so good at riffing, but also I just love the fact that I nailed that picture, and we're gonna keep track of your funny, and I'll see at all the story-based open mics now, and we're just gonna have our own. And Meredith Dietz, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. This is a blast, and I hope everybody listens to it.